Welcome to the show about science and the mind. Qualia. You've probably never heard that word before, but I'm sure you're familiar with, is my red the same red as your red? Well, these ineffable qualities are called qualia, but what is it that makes them indescribable to one another? We're both seeing the same object and calling it red. Well, colour is an illusion. It's your eyes, and more importantly your retina, identifying parts of the visible wavelength of radiation with something your brain can understand. But maybe my brain processes colour differently to your brain, and we would never be able to know. But what is knowing? Let's take the classic thought experiment, Mary's room, where a super scientist is put in a black and white room and is given a black and white TV to study the world. She hears lots of people describing colour and studies how light and colour work. Eventually, she knows everything there is to know about colour. Then, she leaves the room and sees colour for the first time. Has she learnt anything new? This may not seem important, but then how can we understand and know anything if we don't know what knowing is? Or maybe we can learn another way to know, where these qualia are not indescribable. Or maybe the only reason we can't know each other's qualia is because of language and the lexical gap. So what is the lexical gap? The lexical gap, or lacunae, is when a word is missing from a language, and not unlike qualia, it could be difficult to identify a gap when you've grown up with it your entire life. Some examples in English: we have widow, widower, and orphan, but no word for when a parent loses their child. And importantly, like in 1984, could someone control us by manipulating our language and creating large lexical gaps for words like justice and freedom, or even love? But this happens anyway. The Greeks have 4 distinct words for love: agape, eros, philia, and storge. Yet in English, we have large gaps in our communicative ability for love, the most human of emotions. And back to Mary in her black and white room. What if she was never allowed to leave that room? Or rather, what if we aren't, because of our limited perception? Let's look at another thought experiment. An alien from a far-off universe that is only 2-dimensional comes to Earth, and you tell him that if you walk from your house around the world, eventually you will reach your house again, but on the other side. He wouldn't believe you, or rather, he wouldn't be able to believe you. Well, it's believed that our universe has up to 11 dimensions, and we can only perceive 3. Well, 4 if you include time. And if you did include time, would it be the present? Well, not quite. As I'm sure you know, our brains are not perfect. They process everything slightly slower than instantly. To be precise, from the time you see something, your brain only knows it's there 80 milliseconds later. It's quite scary to know that your brain and you can never, have never, and never will be able to live in the present. Or, for example, if you touch an object, you only feel that you're touching the object a minimum of 80 milliseconds later. But are you really even touching the object? Well, no. You see, everything's made up of atoms, and atoms have a ring of negatively charged electrons surrounding them. And like 2 negative poles of 2 magnets, they repel. This repelling force of everything's atoms, combined with a fancy thing called the Pauli exclusion principle, which dictates electrons cannot be pushed onto another orbital, means objects can never touch. So right now, as your butt is touching the chair, you're actually not really touching. This doesn't mean you can't cut through anything. As the 2 objects come in contact, the repulsion of the electrons pushes apart the object you're cutting, while never actually coming in contact. And if you find this concept slightly depressing and wanted to truly touch that person you love, could you? Well, if you are very radioactive, maybe. So hopefully colour takes on a different meaning. It's easy to name but hard to understand, yet a concept with a word to describe it: qualia. Well, words are now more than just their meaning, but the ability to mean something, both in your mind and thoughts, but also when we exchange information. It can be hard to know that everything you've ever experienced was in the past, but not only that, but on an atomic level, you've touched nothing. Maybe this means nothing to you, and life is just the same as before, But with some luck, the way you view life has changed, or even enhanced, and we can start to see things from a new perception, like the alien from another universe. And even if that is mere folly, at least you now know something new, even if it isn't what knowing is.
Still has brains on it.